Welcome back to the Vital Strategies Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Lonergan, and in today's episode, we have some special guests from the Vital team. Joining us are three key members of the planning team at Vital: Nadine Finucci, Carrie Hilburn, and Ryan Johns. We're going to discuss the pros and cons of being a virtual team. Nadine, my personal assistant, helps keep me organized and focused from across the country. She also handles all new account paperwork and moving money for our clients. Carrie is a financial advisor that has helped us develop our systems and processes to expertly coordinate with entrepreneur clients from across the nation. Ryan, the newest addition to our financial advisor team, brings fresh insight from his transition from an in-person firm to our virtual work environment. Today, we're diving deep into the pros and cons of being a virtual team. We'll explore how each team member navigates the challenges and leverages the advantages of working remotely. Make sure you stay to the end to hear their valuable insights into optimizing remote work and how we deliver world-class service, helping our clients pay less tax, build more wealth, so they can live a great life. Let's dive into the conversation with our incredible planning team with Nadine, Carrie, and Ryan. Nadine, thank you for joining us here today. I do appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about having a virtual team and you being a key part of that. You sort of kicked off the whole party with virtual staff. I was in a position where I was tired of trying to hire folks locally, train them up. After a few years, they'd leave because of life reasons, and that was totally fine. And I was like, man, I need to go find somebody that has some experience that can help me out. And I had two friends in a row from the business world ask me if I had heard of this service called Belay, and I'm like, no. But after the second time, I'm like, I better look into it. So I got plugged into Belay, and Belay plugged me into you. And it's been, I think, almost 6 years now. Is that
yeah,
right?
I think in September. September will be 6 years.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's amazing to me. Time flies when you're having fun, apparently. But
it does. And lots of changes with the company in those 6 years. So it's been amazing to see it develop and become what it is.
Because really, it was it was just the two of us, and then we started hiring more people after that. I was concerned. I'm like, how are we going to do all of this financial advisory stuff remotely? I feel like I need people here to help me. And just to outline real quick what your sort of roles and responsibilities, I feel like you make everything happen from a client perspective. Somebody needs new account paperwork, money moved. You're doing all of those things. And then you're also helping me out. I will say managing me, because I need some structure in my life, and you bring a ton of that. And so I do appreciate it. Just helping me sort of stay on task, focused on the things that need to happen that, maybe aren't the top of my mind. So I do appreciate your investment in me and our clients and our firm. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm just would like to comment on is I'm amazed at the number of tasks you complete in a day. We joke that I can do 3 things a day, right? So those 3 things better be like super important projects that are going to move us forward. I'm still amazed by this. Like, we'll be talking, I'll send an email. I have to stop talking to you. I type the email and then I can hit send, and then I'm like back. Where I'm talking to you, you're responding back to me. Then all of a sudden I get a composed email in my inbox from you. I'm like, how did you do that?
Multitasking.
Yes, I am amazed by your ability to get things done. You get more tasks done on a Tuesday than I can get done an entire year. So I so appreciate that. So I think one of the things that would be interesting to talk through is just how we made the transition from an industry that was very like paper-based. We had paper files. We were migrating that direction 6 years ago to being more digital,
and now like almost completely virtual.
Right. Yeah. So I'm in Iowa. You're in California. There's no chance that you're able to just pop into the office and help with anything from setting up, handing me some documents to checking the mail. So how did we? Can you walk through like how we made this transition from having people in the office to what we did to make it work virtually?
Yeah, I think I think COVID definitely pushed it forward a lot faster.
Mm-hmm.
However, we were doing it before COVID. So I think what helped was just having the clients who were used to having emails, having things emailed, sent to them, not having to do necessarily everything in person and doing Zoom meetings and, just being more comfortable with that sort of platform. But I definitely think that helped, having those type of clientele. But we still also had the clients who needed more of the hand holding in person meetings, which you would complete and then send everything to me to finalize. And I think that's what helped also, was having the digital platforms for us to utilize on the backside, where you would still meet in person with the clients.
Yeah, I feel like we almost had like tiers, right? Like we had the digital adopter, cool, we'll send it to you to sign DocuSign. Then we had folks that were maybe sort of in between.
A little resistant.
Right. Yeah. You could send it to me to DocuSign and they could do it on my iPad. Or, then we've got the people that don't trust anything digital, and you would send it to me. I would print it out and get signatures and then get it back to you. So,
yeah. And I think with COVID, that kind of pushed more of those ones that were a little into having to be more comfortable with the digital age of having to do everything basically online and getting a little more comfortable. So I think that kind of helped with us moving forward also. We definitely were doing it before COVID.
Yeah. And I think that actually gave us a huge advantage. The cool thing is you gave me permission to go, all right, this virtual thing works. And I think I should tell this story. So you got started. I think we were doing it very like part-time. And then, we started dialing up your hours because I'm like, this is cool. This is amazing. I appreciate Nadine can get just all sorts of stuff done. And then I had a friend that was, for his 50th birthday, his wife surprised him with a shark diving trip. And my wife was like, sure, Pat would like to go. Well, that included being out to sea for 20 hours, and there was no way I could communicate with you. So I'm like, Nadine.
No service, yeah.
All right, here we go. Here's your list of resources. I'm out. You can't contact me. And I got back and it was like, no issues. I'm like, this is amazing. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. And that sort of sold me on, okay, there's nothing we can't do. And then from there, we hired Carrie, again, all pre-COVID. But I was like, man, I can't find a CFP here in Iowa that lives here that can help us with our planning. So we were moving in the direction of virtual clients. So it was like, it seemed to make a lot of sense. And then the world shut down. And it was like, cool, we're equipped for this.
We're already ready for this.
Yeah, this is not a problem. So good. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the practical pieces. We're in different time zones. I'm in Central Time. You're in Pacific Time. So, when I get to the office at 8 a.m., it's 6 a.m. your time. And can you just talk a little bit about how the time zones, how that affects your rhythm of life?
It actually helps my rhythm. I think I'm a little different than most people. I'm with my husband and family schedule. Having the Central Time hours works better because then I'm off earlier and allows me to be with my children after school, and allows me to, make dinner and have that family bonding time, but also have that time in the morning to get them ready because of the flexibility with remote work. So I think that's very, very unique to being remote and working remote, is you do have, more time with your family. You do have that time to get them ready, get them out the door, all that stuff. So I think working Central Time is actually a benefit for me versus, some people would think it's a downfall because you have to, be up earlier, but I don't mind. And I like being off earlier. So it's a lot better for me to be Central Time than Pacific Time.
Good. I was pretty sure that was the case, but that's always good to hear. One thing that we've also recognized is we think the virtual environment works because we hire professionals. We hire people that are self-starters, they're accountable, they results focused. And so I appreciate your all of those things. So can you talk a little bit about what a typical day looks like for you, how you prioritize the tasks, how you manage all of the things you have going on?
Yeah. So the way my day works is, I get up, I get on my computer, go through some emails, see what's come through from last night to the morning, kind of prioritize the emails. Then I hop onto Juncture and go through my task list for the day and see what I can knock out, what calls I need to make, follow up with any items with clients or the custodians, and kind of just figure out what needs to be done. But I basically just run my whole day off my email and my task list.
Yeah, you do an amazing job. Our CRM is Juncture, and I, and you know this, and I'm sorry for this, but I don't work well inside of the CRM. If something needs to go in there, I'm generally sending it to you to put in there. So
Mhm.
I appreciate that. But you do such a fantastic job using the workflows and Juncture in general to just keep track of those 1,000 tasks you do in a day. I think that's a sort of a key highlight. If somebody's out there looking to sort of build a virtual team or add people to their team virtually, it's like, as an owner, I can go, let's say it's the 5th of July. Nobody's working. Somehow I run into a client and there's a question, somebody texts me, whatever. And I'm like, oh, I can go into the CRM and I can see all the things you've done. I can see
Mhm.
all the emails the client sent back and forth between the two of you. And I can sort of pick up and sort of know what's happening. And so I think that central framework of the CRM is just a fantastic tool for us to be able to communicate effectively inside of the team.
Yes. Yeah. And I think as, our company grows, it's going to be really effective for being able to help when people are on vacation or,
Mhm.
out sick or anything like that, is being able to look at those notes and seeing what has that person done? What can I do to help move this forward? Or what can I do to help answer those clients' questions? Having those notes, because we are virtual, definitely helps versus if we were in office, maybe we would be talking about it at the water cooler or something, but
Right.
because we're virtual, we don't really talk about what's happening.
Hmm.
So I think those notes are very important in the CRM.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a benefit of being virtual. Like, all of those bits of communication gets captured, where the
Hmm.
water cooler conversation doesn't, or the scraps of paper that something gets written down on, or if I have to go find a client file in somebody else's office, it's like we don't have to deal with any of that. So,
Exactly. You're not having to track it down like, hey, this file is not where it's supposed to be. Where is it? It's
mhm.
always where it's supposed to be because it's on a database, it's in a computer. So it's
Yeah.
always where it's supposed to be.
So one of the things that, you know, virtual work environment can be great for a number of reasons, but there's also some challenges. What would you say would the challenges be of uh, working remotely, and how do you handle those?
I think the challenges would be just not having so much personal interaction with your
Hmm.
employee or with your coworkers. Also, just not really knowing what's going on in their life. Like maybe there's something happening and you don't understand what's happening. You're like, why aren't they responding back to me? They always respond back right away.
Hmm.
So I think just having that lack of communication that's constantly happening in an office where you don't really get virtually. I do think that we do a really good job at that. We do have 2 meetings a week where we all kind of talk together before we get into work stuff. So I think that definitely helps kind of understand where people are, what's happening with them. If there's something that we can do to help them in their personal life, to help with work, kind of keep it. So,
Hmm.
I definitely think those meetings help.
You're right, but I do feel like it's a piece that is missing, that we don't get virtually that we do in person. Because we would have,
Hmm.
instead of two 15-minute sessions a week, we would have the proverbial water cooler, lunch, all of those other times to,
Yeah.
like, bump into each other and just, and oftentimes we're not seeing each other. We might see each
Yeah.
other on a Zoom, but you sort of show up different, where like you see each other and you can sort of tell something's off with somebody, right? And you can connect and go, "Hey, how
Yes.
you doing?"
Yeah.
So, I would agree with you there. How about work-life balance? I can see a scenario where, when your home is also your workplace, it's hard to sort of shut it off because there's going to be another task to knock out. How do you balance all that?
It can be hard to just completely shut off, especially, doing things from my phone. I'll get emails throughout the night and I'll look at
Hmm.
them. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm responding to them. I try not to respond after certain hours just because I do try to shut off. But, if it's just a quick answer and I already know it, I'll
Hmm.
respond back to a client. But there is, you have to be a little strict with yourself and realize, hey, this is my cutoff time. I'll get back to
Hmm.
you tomorrow type of thing, unless it's an emergency or if it's a one-off reason. There are certain things where it's like, okay, yeah, I totally get it. Like, let's figure this out real quick. But I think just having that boundary where, hey, this is the cutoff time. Let's
Hmm.
make sure I'm not responding to emails too much after this time, or doing any other tasks after this time. Like I need to shut off and walk away from my computer. I think that helps.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I try to encourage that,
Hmm.
please don't expect, if I send you an email at 10 p.m., it means I've put the kids to bed and I'm just cleaning stuff up. It doesn't mean I need a response.
And I will say, like in the beginning, I feel like that was something where I was like, oh, I better respond. I don't want, him to think that I'm
Hmm.
not looking but I think having you as a boss and being like, hey, no, you need to make sure you cut off at this
Hmm.
time. Don't just because somebody's sending you something or I'm sending something doesn't necessarily mean I'm, wanting a response
Hmm.
back right at that time. So I think having, that reassurance that it's fine. Hey, you don't need to respond back right away. That helped a lot also for me to finally let it go and be like, hey,
Yeah.
this is my cutoff time and be a little more strict with myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big believer in rest. And there's been times where I've been like, Nadine, you don't need to respond to these emails or text messages or what have you. You're on vacation. Like, please, like, just let it be. But you've
Yeah,
also shared like, hey, I have a minute. I'm okay just like not having this avalanche of work fall on me when I get back.
exactly.
So I'm just chipping away at some of these easy items. I'm like, okay, that you're a professional. I trust you. That's totally fine.
And I think that's the beauty of remote work is, if I am on vacation, where if you're in office, you come back and there's so much work. It's like, oh my gosh, I wish I was still on vacation, or this is just so
Hmm.
much. I'm just so stressed now. Where remote work, yeah, like if I'm just sitting around doing nothing, or I'm like, hey, I'm not like I'm waiting for someone to get ready, or
Hmm.
um, something like that. Like I can chip away at some of these emails, some of these tasks, so I'm not so stressed when I get back from work or from my vacation. So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a nice thing about being remote. Also, is you can kind of pick and choose things that you want to do when you want to do them, even if you're on vacation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think too, the fact that we don't have an official vacation policy, like
Hmm.
please take it. And all of the data says if you don't take at least 2 weeks of vacation a year, you're less productive. And so my thought is like, please, I want you all to take time off and sort of be unplugged and disconnected and refresh and relax. But Carrie made an interesting point once. She was like, when I was working in office, if I had a 2 hour long thing I had to go do, I would take a whole day of PTO. And she was like,
Hmm.
now I don't have to do that. I can just like work, go do my thing, come back, and I just make sure I don't have anything scheduled during that time. And so, um, I don't know. It does seem like there's some flexibility there that allows you to, take time off when you're taking time off, but also like if you need to fit things into your workday, it's totally
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. And I think it's very helpful having a family and having that flexibility. If I need to pop at my kid's school real quick to watch a
Hmm.
recital or, something really quick where it's only a
Yep.
45, 50-minute thing, you normally would have to take way more time off of work because
Hmm.
of that, because, you have to drive home and then to their school. I don't have to do that. I'm already at my house. I don't have to drive from my work to get to that school event
Yeah.
or something like that. So, there's a lot of flexibility with working with remote, which I really enjoy. And I think it's very helpful.
So, what advice would you give to somebody that's been considering hiring a virtual, I'll call it personal assistant or virtual team member? Do you have any thoughts on, hey, make sure when you hire somebody, do this? Because I will say the thing that one of the reasons it's worked so well is I think our personalities are aligned well. And I think Belay maybe did a pretty good job of this. But
Hmm.
the way I manage, it's like, here's an outcome. I don't know the best way to get to it. And you did a great
Hmm.
job of going, cool. I'm just going to use my resources and figure out how to get this outcome. So I think that helped. But do you have thoughts
Yeah.
on if, somebody's looking to hire a virtual assistant, like what things they need to keep in mind?
Yeah. I definitely think making sure you're both like your personalities align. Obviously, you don't want somebody who you're just dread talking to every time because that's just not going to be helpful in a virtual work environment.
Hmm.
Also, I think making sure that the person that you hire is very good at being task orientated and making sure that they can get those tasks to the finish line without necessarily constantly asking you for help, and making sure they're resourceful is something that they need to look at also.
Yeah. And
But
I think one
oh, go
thing
ahead.
too that's really helped us is, and you've been through a few iterations of this, more than a few, just our CRM and having like a platform to gather all the data
Hmm.
and the workflows. And I don't have to text you and go, Nadine, what's happening here? Now, sometimes I
Hmm.
do because I'm, in the middle of something and it's like, I need to know something right now. But that just allows us some platform to just really communicate effectively on without having to communicate directly. So I think
Yeah.
that's,
And when you do text me those questions or email me, hey, what's happening with this? It's easy for me to answer those questions because I do pop on the CRM real quick, and it's super quick
mhm,
for me just to respond back to you. Versus if we didn't have that, I'm like, oh
yeah,
wait, let me look through my emails, let me look through my notes on my desk or
right.
something like that. Having that CRM definitely helps be able to just pop on, be like, hey, this is what's happening.
Yeah, good. Nadine, anything else? I've got one follow-up question, but anything else on virtual work environment and any wisdom you want to share before we wrap up?
I think just to say if somebody's thinking about going virtual, just to do it because it
Hmm.
definitely is very helpful and it works out. And you just got to work through those kinks. And
Yeah,
before you know it, you're like, wow, I can do everything virtually. So it
yeah,
definitely helps.
yeah, absolutely. And I just look at personally the talent pool that it opens us up to and the
Yes.
clients we can serve. The fact that our
Hmm.
team is all virtual makes it super easy to serve our clientele, which is virtual, which means we can be hyper focused on one particular type of client, which happens to be an entrepreneur that makes over $1 million that has a tax problem, right? So it's like,
Hmm.
you know, that would be hard to do if I tried to run this practice just on the people in my Clinton, Iowa, that has 30,000 people or less. It's like, well, that number's pretty small. And we're going to have to either expand our geography or figure out a new way of doing business. Good news is we
Yeah,
figured out a
exactly.
new way of doing business. So
Yeah. And you
good.
get better employees, I feel like, because you can just find ones that,
Hmm. Yeah.
really are the best ones versus, oh, well, these are the only ones who applied because there's only two people that want to work here.
Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
the city smaller, so it definitely helps
Yeah.
open up that as
Yeah.
well.
That's great. So, one final question. What can we do to make the remote work experience at Vital better?
I think just always improving and looking at new technology and, you know, if we just sit down and like, okay, well, this is how we do it and we're never going to change anything, I think, that's
Hmm.
not going to be helpful for us in the future. There's always new and improved ways to do things, and there's always new and improved technology to use. And I definitely think that we're doing a great job at constantly looking at new things and trying things out. They might not always work the way that we want them to, or
Yep.
we might be like, hey, nope, this isn't working the way that we want. Let's not use it. But I think just being open to that is something
Yeah.
that I really like about Vital.
Cool. Nadine, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for just embracing whatever it is that I am and being able to sort of just help me be better. You help me manage all of the things we have going on, and I so appreciate that. And really, because of you, it opened up a whole different direction for our firm, and I just appreciate that. So, thanks for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Carrie, welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited to have you back. Today, we're digging into what it's like to work as a virtual team. And I just appreciate how you really help us create a framework inside of Vital that has allowed us to have a virtual firm and be able to deliver client work at a really high level. And so I'm excited on getting into that topic here today because you've been sort of instrumental in helping us really design all those pieces. When we think about the work we do, it's really projects, right? And it's projects with different categories under different categories. But can you walk through sort of the approach we have for project management for our clients being a virtual team and virtual clients? Yes, can you talk about that?
Yeah. So I would think our team, if we just tried to oversimplify things, which is most things are not simple, but we have to do it somehow. So if we oversimplify things, we usually put every sort of project in one of five categories, which would be cash flow, insurance, estate and legal, investments, or tax. So somewhere in there, and it might, a lot of tax problems or tax projects, we also have to kind of focus on them from a cash flow lens too. But we try to oversimplify it and just say, okay, where's the project at and where's it landing? And then start to essentially put together a, scope and schedule for that project of, okay, what are the first steps? Who's responsible? Who needs to be involved? And how do we tackle it?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think there's a few things. There's a number of directions we can go with this. I want to unpack some of those pieces. But I think if we were to start high level and think about how we approach the project management piece, we've come up with what we call, the vital client experience. Everybody's onboarding looks exactly the same. The first 5 or 6 meetings are all identical for every single client because we're trying to figure out where we're at on the map, what's important to them, where they want to go, and just get a very clear picture of all the data and all the stuff that we get involved in. It just takes a long time to gather it all. So I think the client experience is sort of the first part. And again, you did a great job sort of pushing that agenda forward with us because, I would say when we first started doing this complex tax planning for clients, client A would walk in and be like, hey, I want a purple submarine, and be like, sure, we'll build that for you. Next client would walk in and be like, I want a green rocket ship, and we'd be like, yep, we can do that too. And it's like, we end up with those outcomes, but we do it now through the context of the client experience. And you were sort of like, hey, we've got to stop doing this. We can't do everything custom every single time. We have to have a framework to start from. And so I want to acknowledge that and appreciate it.
Yeah. We all noticed there was room to improve capacity in there. And so our approach is still extremely customized. There's no client that is the same as another, and their whole situation is not the same. But what we tried to do is just use past experience and resources and put together essentially a starting point of when you come and engage, we want it to look the same for everybody. The reports are different. They're obviously personalized, and the information we're taking on is different for different clients. But the overall process and deliverables look the same, so that we have comparison to year over year to provide clients with like some history there. But the hard part is, it's a double-edged sword because no clients are the same. And so when they're onboarding, typically they're coming to us with a problem to solve. And so we've had to be very diligent of doing everything we can to stay on that process because we were very confident in it. And then through going through it, we realized that it is the right thing. Let's get onboarded in this very detailed manner because it allows us to then focus on projects and get them done in a more efficient manner. And so oftentimes when clients come on board and they're like, I have this thing, it's top of mind, like, please don't forget. And we have to really spend some time and say, okay, is this a fire that we just contain for the moment and get through our client experience? Or is it a fire we need to like put out first and then get back on process?
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think we're dealing with some of that right now. We've got a client with a couple of urgent issues and we're like, well, we're going to try to do all of this while we're onboarding. And it's so interesting how much more challenging it gets to solve some of those problems without all of the foundation laid on the onboarding process. So good. So how do we keep track of all of these complex things we have moving on? What technologies, what tools are we using to be able to do that?
For me, the documentation piece is key. When I first started working in the virtual environment, I think one of the hardest things was knowing clients at a deep level where it's like top of your head. In person, I saw them, I knew how tall they were, I knew what was going on in their family because, just you're in person. Maybe I saw them out and about in town, but going virtual, it was kind of a learning curve, which is odd because now I don't feel that way, but I do remember at the beginning. And so documentation is key. The other thing is we're virtual. We don't have files to go pull their file and dig in, and then it comes to you. So a lot of our clients are also virtual, I would say, very heavy. So we're collecting data at a very rapid pace, all online. So if we didn't have that stored in a manner where you could reference it quickly, we would not be doing a very good job.
Yeah. Let's talk about documentation for a second. I think I know what you mean, but what are you referring to with documentation and how are we collecting all of that information?
Our PDF, like client files, everything we receive from a client is saved. For me, emails, the rate we receive emails and communication from clients, however, I always say, I have my ways, but our team, when new folks come on board, it's like, you've got to figure out whichever way works for you. If you don't know of a way, then, we'll all share how we do it and figure out what works best for you. And then the last piece is our CRM. We always say if it's not in CRM, then it didn't happen. That's our history book for each client, that essentially we try to note every single conversation. If a client texts us even, which is not preferred, but it does happen, that has to go in there as well. Where if I don't know, if I disappeared for a few days or something, somebody could come in and virtually pick up the pieces. And I think that's the end goal, is that if something happened to anybody on our team, could another member of our team step in where services continued on for clients where they almost wouldn't realize anything had happened.
Yeah, no, and I think that's absolutely correct. And I can't tell you how many times the CRM saved me. You've been working on something, Nadine's been working on something. I'm interacting with a client. They have a question about a specific thing that I have not touched yet. I don't know anything about it, but I can go to the CRM and I can quickly get up to speed and go, all right, cool. I know exactly where this thing is. On Tuesday it was mailed out. It'll be there on Wednesday, and everything's going to be good to go. So the CRM's been,
and even our emails go in there, which is a lifesaver, because if a client somehow is emailing directly with you and I'm left off, but you're out of the office or in a meeting and they're needing a quick response, we're able to go in there and see that and essentially pick up the pieces, even if it wasn't in our specific Outlook box. So having, great continuity amongst our team is probably a really big piece of it all.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I look at the CRM as sort of a communication tool. Like, I could email you a status update, but I don't need to do that because all of the data is right there. And you can just, if you want to know something about a client, status of a project, you can go get plugged in there. So I think another thing that's happened inside of the CRM that's valuable is we find these complex projects that we work on over and over again. We start to create workflows because we've got multiple people involved. It's really nice that you can sort of do your piece, you check your final box, then Nadine knows that she needs to get back involved and sort of run from there. Can you talk a little bit about workflows and just how they help make us more efficient?
Yeah, I would say workflows would be the equivalent to automation, but if you talk to some of our clients, oftentimes I think we feel like we're behind. We certainly try to automate when possible. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, financial services is such an old industry, and I think they've crippled themselves along to stay up to date. So we do what we can to also stay in compliance too. Compliance often has a hindering effect on that. But, our CRM does have the ability to have automated workflows within it. It's another, I guess, internal project when we're not client facing. We're making sure that our own technology is built out and up to date. If a process has changed, make sure we're documenting that, where the automation piece continues to follow along with it. So it's certainly a full-time, it's an ongoing project on our just working on the business of keeping those items up to date so our team is running efficiently.
Absolutely. And I feel like workflows are all evolutionary. They all started as a Word document. Like, let's just start putting all the steps down. And then they start turning into software solutions, which are really nice. It's nice I don't have to remember exactly what to do. I can go look and see, and the process sort of tells me where to go next, which is nice.
Maybe at some point, AI can have a greater part in it, but our compliance, in the financial industry is such a big piece of it, which is frustrating at times because we have clients who are really on the cutting edge of all of that.
Yeah, good. So moving on, what are the challenges working in a virtual team environment?
I would say just the communication aspect of it. What do they call it? What was the term? The Zoom meeting fog or something like that? Like, people that are in Zoom meetings all day long. And so then you get in and you really can't focus. The other piece is, I think people get on a Zoom call and it's like, okay, it started at 12, it's 12:01, let's jump into it. And so you lack that, first few minutes when you maybe sit down in a conference room early and are just catching up with somebody, or, I would say in the office days, you met a client in the lobby and they were getting their coffee and you're going to sit down and you're talking to them about how their spouses or kids or grandkids are, or what travels they have. And so I think the fact that it's like a scheduled time, it just feels kind of different.
Yeah.
And so we have to be very cognizant about taking the few minutes at the beginning to actually connect and kind of humanize the conversations.
Yeah.
So I think that poses a challenge that we just have to be cognizant of, and it can be avoided. But then the second piece is, I think you're not in front of somebody to shake their hand. And so there's a level of trust that comes with just seeing somebody eye to eye. And so I think virtually it just takes a little more time sometimes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that's a little bit of our goal with the podcast too, is like, let's let people have an opportunity to meet us, get to know us, hear how we think before we, are sitting down in front of them going, hey, let us manage all the intimate details of your financial life. So
one time a prospect said, I think it was our second time to meet this individual, and we asked for tax returns and cash flow statements, and she kind of hesitated, and we are like, is everything okay? Do you have any questions? And she's like, I think you're asking me to undress on a second date. And I don't know if you remember that. It was like, you're not wrong,
Yep.
Yeah, to put it bluntly.
Yes. Yeah. No, that's it's good, and it's true. And I think you're making a good point about like the virtual meeting environment. Like it is efficient. It is a very efficient way to have meetings. But I heard this once, and I think there's a lot of truth in it. Be efficient with things, not with people. And I think unfortunately it's sort of flipped over, and we're efficient with people, and it's hard to like build those connections that you get to make in person when you maybe have an hour scheduled for the meeting, but it runs 5 minutes early because you run into them getting coffee, and then it lasts 15 minutes longer because you're just chatting about whatever's going on in life. So you came from a traditional in-office environment to a virtual environment with us. What do you like about the change from in-person to virtual?
Virtually, I would say, obviously, with that came flexibility in my instance, which I appreciate. And I think I was really empowered to kind of have more control over my own time. And so that was a plus for me. I don't know if that would be a plus for every person, but that was certainly how I viewed it. And I think the other thing that I appreciate is it allowed my clients that I work with to expand drastically. So the clients I work with now are complete opposite than what I used to work with. And it's not that one's better than the other, but it is fun getting to make connections with folks all over. So, our team's getting together here in Chicago in a few weeks. It turns out a client's going to be there because they're nearby. If I was still in an office environment, I probably would have never met that client in person. Mm-hmm. So with this, we happen to be getting it together and it all aligns, but so that stuff's fun. And just having clients that do all sorts of, their businesses are so different because they're all over the place across the U.S. And so that's been a lot of fun and a big change.
Yeah, cool. And I also think there's a couple of things that it takes to make a virtual environment work. Like first, I think you have to hire the right people. They have to be self-motivated. They have to be responsible, accountable, all of those things. And then I'm from a leadership perspective, I'm not a micromanager. Like I just expect you to get your outcomes. And I also probably should apologize to you for how little we had for training and development when we first started. Like we were sort of figuring it out. You were the first advisor we had hired virtually. So it was like, oh, this is different. So I appreciate your patience with us and just your investment in making that smoother for the advisors that have come after you. So that's been good. But I think those things have allowed the virtual environment to work. You're just a professional. Everybody we are looking to hire is a professional that can be trusted to get their work done. And we'll give you a track to run on. Hey, here's how we think this is best. But we're also have no pride of ownership. If there's a better way, feel free to pursue that and share the new wisdom with us. But yeah, good. Okay, so I guess my question is, what can we do to help make your experience at Vital better?
Working virtually or in person, I think there's a lot of times where you could say you spend more time with your coworkers than your spouse or family. It ebbs and flows, of course, but so I think the one thing that stays the same with that is you still have to enjoy the people you work with. And so for us, we work at a very high speed. Oftentimes, we're all busy at any given time. And so we try our very, very best to always keep it top of mind to take a few minutes, connect on a like human scale, not just work wise, and, connect as individuals. And so I think there's times where, we're in the thick of some big projects, and anytime we hop on, it's like, let's jump into it. Let's keep going about our day. And typically somebody will give it a second and be like, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? What's your spout? Where are the kids? What camps are they in? Or, whatever it is. But I think we all have to do a really good job of like remembering every now and then, like, I think we take turns of who kind of makes the call of like, it's always at the right time. Somebody takes a deep breath and is just like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
But I think if we keep that at the forefront, then, everybody has a place here, right? Everybody feels like we're all swimming in the same direction.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that goes back to the efficient with things, not people. But one of the last things we want to do as a virtual team, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but is to like hop on another Zoom just to hang out, right? Like I've already been on enough Zooms today. I don't need to just like show up to one and chat with my teammates. But I think you're right, and I like the fact that we're making a conscious effort to get together more often, a couple times a year, just to bring everybody together and spend a moment working on the business, and then just connect as well. Carrie, I do appreciate all of your investment in Vital, and it's been good. It delivers a ton of value for our clients, and so thank you.
Thank you, Pat.
All right.
Let's go.
Ryan, I appreciate you joining me here today for the podcast, talking about what it's like to work in a virtual environment. We're trying to just help people understand what are some of the things that work, what are some of the things that don't work. And the thing I'm looking forward to you is you had a decade or more,
at least
more, working in person, in office. And now you've been 6 months or so virtual. And so
Right.
I'm excited to just sort of hear your thoughts and feedback on what's working, what's not working, things we can do better. So I'm just interested in your initial impressions. How was the first 6 months gone for you just working in a virtual environment?
I feel like before I left my prior firm, I had some maybe hybrid experience just because I'd be out of the office meeting with clients. And then there's days where you end up having some remote work. I didn't fully appreciate some of the nuances of what a full-on virtual environment would be like, and in pros and cons, right? And I think my initial assessment of the first 6 months is like, man, this offers a lot of flexibility, and it also has enabled me to interact with my wife and my 3 kids differently and more often.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we try to do when we're hiring people is we're looking for professionals that can self-manage, right? Because you're not getting micromanaged. I'm not telling you when and how and what to be doing outside of just show up for the client meeting and some of our regularly scheduled meetings. And so I think that matters. And then it also, being accountable, results oriented, and sort of self-driven, I think all factor in there. And you seem to be doing a nice job with all those things. So are any of those things anything that you're like, wow, this is different than when I was working in the office from a freedom, flexibility perspective that are now a challenge?
I think what I wasn't anticipating is it's actually easier to work more.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to be intentional about, as a dad and as a husband, I have to be intentional about creating some separation, whether it may not be literal separation because, I'm in my office here in my home, but just being intentional about monitoring whether I should be in dad mode and turn it off, for the night. And how do I do that? So that was something I wasn't expecting, is that it's just kind of easier to stay engaged and work a little longer because the office is right here.
Yeah, no, that's good. So I think an interesting thing that I'm curious on your perspective of is, working in an office environment where you have your peers, next door, down the hall, that type of thing, versus your peers are now spread all over the country.
Right.
How is that dynamic? It's been different, but can you just talk a little bit about positives,
Yeah.
negatives of that.
Yeah. Well, I will say that as a Florida native, growing up here and never having to think too much about anything but the Eastern time zone, that's been part of it. I now have to pay attention to Central and Mountain and Pacific sometimes. I think one thing that a lot of people can relate to is there's some camaraderie when you're in the office live. It's very easy. You can overhear someone's conversation, say, "Oh, do you need help with that?" Or and maybe that's not always a good thing when someone can overhear your conversation, but it's easier to engage, I think, on a personal level, and then also to have a very quick, spontaneous interaction about, whatever case you're working on, whatever's going on. Say, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And for us, we need to be more intentional about the social aspect and also interacting on projects. And I think we do a pretty good job of that, really.
Yeah, I think the social aspect is hard. If there's one thing I would fix, it would be that. We would figure out a way to spend more time together face to face. I really don't love the idea of going, hey, let's spend more time together on another Zoom meeting, right? Like,
Right.
I
Just
think
adding
Zoom,
meetings for the sake of meetings can be frowned
right?
upon.
Yeah, Zoom fatigue is sort of I think, a real thing. And so, a lot of times our internal team meetings, we're not turning the camera on, and that's okay. Like, I just don't need to be sitting in front of the camera again. So,
Right.
yeah, and so we get together a couple times a year, which is nice to just work on the business and spend some time together and have some fun together. But it's just not. I'll say that's a key factor that is a challenge that I don't know necessarily how to overcome. Is like how we get more of that interpersonal time together, water cooler,
Yeah.
lunch, that type of thing. So,
Well, and I think, as we scale, that problem may change. It will. It will change and morph, right? Because right now, one of the things that I think is nice and helpful is if we've got a client meeting, we'll debrief after the client meeting, obviously to work on some takeaways from that meeting and next steps. But oftentimes that's an opportunity just to check in. How's your week going? What do you have planned? And that's important, I think, to make sure we understand what's going on with everybody.
yeah, yeah, no, that's good. All right, so now let's focus on client meetings for a second. You've done a number of in-person client meetings. You've done a great job managing the virtual meeting environment. Could you give us some insight into how you see that benefits the client going to a virtual environment versus having to come
Yeah.
into an office?
And I think it's interesting because we might tend to think about it in terms of some clients may like it, some clients may not, depending upon their personality type. But some of the power behind virtual meetings is that we have instantaneous access to just about all of the documents and files that we might need, and we can find them very quickly. And so, if we go down a rabbit hole a little bit because of a client has a question about investment type or something other than what we planned on talking about, we can be pretty nimble. And I think it's more nimble than when I'm meeting in my conference room at another office and having to get a document printed because we're going to screen share. Say, oh, this
Yeah.
is what I'm seeing. So I think that's a major benefit to the client. Obviously, we always think about commuting time. If a client doesn't need to drive into an office, and it's enabled us to have much broader reach. So if a client is traveling, we've had meetings with clients who are overseas and they
Yep.
were able to meet. They wanted to, so maybe they don't want to if they're on a vacation. But
Yep.
we're pretty flexible because of that virtual meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing too is it allows us to serve a very specific client because we're not limited by our geography either, So
Right.
our entrepreneurs that have a tax problem and sort of need the entrepreneur private office installed in their lives, it's like we can do that. Where if we were just in Tampa, Florida, or you know, Dallas or Southern California or Clinton, Iowa, like that's going to be harder to find the clientele
Yeah.
locally that, are going to go, yes, I want that, need that service. So,
And I would say thinking about the clients that we work with, the business owners, obviously time is valuable to everyone.
mhm,
But it is very common for us to meet with somebody who is in between meetings.
yep,
And they may not be at their office or their home.
yep,
And so they're taking our meeting and
mhm,
getting other things done that day.
yep. I think we had a call earlier in the week where the client was in the car. They were driving.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're walking through cash flow calendar and we're walking through tax optimization. I mean, we're having
Yeah.
a very helpful meeting, but
Mhm.
he's trying to make the most of his time for that day. And so I think it's very helpful.
So how about you? How has it affected you as an advisor moving from and you maybe touched on a few of these pieces, but going from an in-person meeting to a virtual environment?
Yeah. I think relationships are important and building trust is important. And maybe initially when all of these virtual meetings started becoming more commonplace, there was resistance from clients and advisors to engage that way because you're trying to build that relationship. And how do you do it if you're not in person? So that has been, maybe there's a little bit of a learning curve there for me to make sure I'm paying attention to body language and facial expressions as we're talking, while also managing the documents that we're trying to share. From a technology standpoint, we might utilize PowerPoint, have PDFs open. We might have a live Excel document that we're working in. And that is a little bit of a learning process, I think, too, to navigate comfortably in that space and recognize that we're also kind of leading the way, or we're kind of driving the bus. At a conference room table, you can just grab a physical document and say, "Hey, look at this."
Right.
And with what we're doing, you say, "No, we've got to get it on the right screen," and then remember that you're sharing or that you're not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll say that was a skill that I didn't fully understand when we first got started, was to how to organize everything from the Zoom screen to my presentation to all of the documents I could possibly have up. It's like it takes some organization before the meeting and just getting into a good rhythm for how to manage all those things, because it does take a little bit of energy and effort. So
it does, but I would go back to what we kind of mentioned earlier, which is once you kind of have the hang of it and have everything available that you'd like to utilize, you can move through it and do things more quickly, which is great.
Yeah, I do feel like the meetings are efficient, but back to that trust factor and like getting to connect with the human being, sometimes that efficiency isn't good for those pieces. So thinking about your daily work routines and productivity, how has being virtual affected that compared to being in an office?
A lot of my day is still kind of regulated by the calendar. And so there's some of that kind of feels similar in terms of, well, what's going on today? And that's going to govern the time that I can get X, Y, and Z done if it's not, prep for a meeting. Because I've given up the commute, and down here in Tampa, Florida, I know in Clinton the commute's a little bit different, but down here in Tampa, Florida, my commute has gone from an hour plus one way to potentially next to nothing. And that can be odd because, as I was referencing earlier, it can actually be easier to engage sooner or disengage later in the day if you're not paying attention, being here at home. And so one way that I've kind of adjusted that is I kind of treat taking the kids to school or getting them to their bus as my commute. And then when I arrive back at the house, it's like, okay, here we go. And try to have bookends in terms of the working hours so that I have a pretty clear idea in my head about what the day is going to look like. Because I'm also trying not to have things bleed over too much into the evening hours once I need to kind of put a different hat on.
That's great. And good for you for recognizing those boundaries, because it's easy to slip into like, all I do is work. I'm at my office all the time. So
yeah, I don't know that I've nailed it yet. These are good ideas, and I'm, but I don't think I've nailed it yet.
I feel like anything in life, right? We're always working on improving and fine tuning. So
yeah, balance is good. That's all.
That's right. Okay, so being a new member on a virtual team, it's hard to connect with people, right? Because you're going to lean on them for all of the training and development and all of those pieces. And so,
sure.
Can you talk a little bit about how did you get integrated into the team in a way that you're like, hey, this is comfortable. I like these people.
I kind of think of it kind of from two different structures. One is kind of a mentor structure, and the other I would say is like a buddy system in a way. And, mentor structure, Pat, you and I meet regularly. A few times a week, we kind of have a standing meeting where you say, okay, we're going to spend 30 minutes. And a lot of times we're working on things that are coming up that day or that week. But early on, that was a very good kind of platform for us to engage and talk about very high level things. Even in terms of the software that we're using, here's a program that we use, but this is how we use it. So I was able to get kind of regular training through those mentor meetings to make sure I'm understanding the tools and communicating the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll say you've done a great job. The thing that we really valued was, I'll call it your longevity at your last firm. Like we don't see that very often, and like, man, there's that says something about your character. And so I'm like, when you were willing to join the team, I'm like, this is great. And then just how you've been able to sort of put your own spin on things, and you know, we feel like it's our job to hire professionals. You absolutely fall into that category. And then to see your work product and go, cool. This is good. I didn't think of it that way. That's been a lot of fun to see just you sort of get on what we'll call the client experience and just be able to
Right.
to take and run and make it your own. You've done a great job with that.
Well,
So
and
thank
I
you.
might backtrack a little bit and say maybe I think of it three ways because you just made a good point. The mentor system is helpful. We've
Hmm.
kind of covered that. The buddy system I think of in terms of engaging with Carrie and Nadine
Hmm.
and kind of my peers to say, okay, how would you handle this? And I had many conversations and Zoom meetings with the two of them to make sure I'm operating properly. And I
Hmm.
still, I just talked to Carrie earlier today to look at an investment allocation, right?
Hmm.
So it's important to have that buddy system too to say, what would you do here? And then something that you just brought up, which I will add as my third leg of the stool here, is a pretty well defined client experience and process.
Hmm.
So early on, and maybe this is not necessarily virtual versus a physical environment or in person,
Hmm.
but early on, when you say, okay, how do the client meetings work and what are the expectations? You say, well, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
We go from kickoff to key observations to solutions to implementation. So there's a lot of those helpful tools in the background to help me understand kind of the culture and the work product and the process of
Yeah.
Vital.
Yeah, that's great. And I have to give a lot of credit to Carrie for the client experience. Early on, we would, uh, everything was custom and it was not good.
Right.
We got the work done, but it was just a lot of work because we didn't have the foundation of all the data and sort of clear tools that helped us quickly figure out what all the opportunities were. So once we got that sorted out, it was like it allowed us to then give everybody a custom solution, and all the reports are custom for each individual client. But it was nice to have this like foundation from the client experience to start from. We have that for onboarding, and then like an annual rhythm. All of our entrepreneur clients have the same needs throughout the year, and so it's like we're looking at those things. And then there's going to be the random stuff that pops up, like, hey, somebody's looking to acquire my business, or I'm looking to make an acquisition, or I've got this real estate project. Can you help us with that? So
Yeah.
it's we just slot those things into our rhythm. But that's good, very good. Thank you. And one thing that I think was also nice, just from my perspective, was meeting in person before you decided to join us, right?
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
let's connect as like human beings. If we're gonna make this career change, like let's see each other in person for a minute and spend some time together. We have a hiring requirement, and it's called the 4-hour car ride. Could I go on a 4-hour car ride with that person?
I like that.
Because if the answer is no, then they're a no. And so it's like you really don't know in a hour long
Yeah.
Zoom presentation if somebody fits that criteria. But when you go spend a weekend together with you and your family, it's like, all right, I could do the 4-hour car ride. Let's do
Yeah,
this. So,
and you also got to see my three kids and how they behave during putt putt,
yeah,
which I think putt putt is going to bring out the true
yes.
colors of any child. So
Yes, and of the individual, like how competitive are people, right?
that's true.
So it was fun playing putt putt with your wife and finding out that she's just a stone cold killer. Like she
Yeah,
wants to win. Period. End of story. So
yeah, she's a competitor for sure.
it's good. So I've asked this question to Carrie and Nadine, and based on your experience, what can we do to make the virtual work environment better?
We touched on one item earlier, which is just kind of how do we engage socially to make sure we're kind of having some of that water cooler talk,
Hmm.
and that can be hard. But I do think that's important from a company culture standpoint. And I think culture, kind of who we are and the vision is important
Hmm.
for any company, but I think probably even more so when we don't necessarily get together unless we're intentional about it.
I totally agree with that. I feel like it's the number one challenge with a virtual work environment is the interpersonal relationships, like connecting as human beings versus just uh, sort of robots getting work done, and I think it's a challenge with our clients too that we try to overcome.
I do think that one thing that we have in place that is pretty helpful in that regard is we almost always are going to have 2 advisors in every client meeting. I think that helps both from the company culture standpoint so that we can be consistent in how we operate and communicate and see each other in action, but then also from the client standpoint to get to know multiple advisors and make sure they're engaged with who is going to be working on their case. So
yeah, no, that's good. And it also just those redundancies are nice. If somebody's out on vacation, a client has a question or an issue that needs to be resolved. It's like I don't have to go read the entire list of notes in the CRM to figure out what's going on. It's like, oh,
right,
yeah, here we go. This is the path forward. So
if I had to add a second item of something that we could be mindful of to continue to improve in the virtual environment, it's just ensuring that the tools that allow us to operate efficiently from a technological standpoint are updated and maintained.
That's good. I think one thing that I have to be careful of, my personality is like I get excited about shiny new things. And so I can almost
we're not going to lag behind.
I can take that too far and be like, hey guys, here's a new thing. Like, let's switch our CRM again, and it's like, no, Pat, I heard this and there's so much truth to it. It's like, it was something along the lines of the tools are not the way to success. We could run our firm on a Google Sheet, right? And sort of keep track of all of the things going on with the clients in a complex spreadsheet. That would be stupid, would be inefficient, but like we could. And I don't think we would deliver any less, fantastic tax solutions doing it that way. But, if we get caught up in finding shiny new toys every now and then, but yeah, I like to be on the front edge of the software, and I just feel like it creates efficiencies that are all really good. So any final thoughts on, COVID sort of kicked us all into this virtual environment, whether we wanted to or not, which, the cool thing is we were virtual before virtual was cool. So do you have any thoughts on sort of the future of virtual work and how, that's going to shift things for our society?
I mean, I think it's a tidal wave that can't be stopped for most industries, not for all, of course, but certainly for the professional environment, it's going to keep moving in that direction. And so I think that that's going to lead ultimately to people having to be more intentional, like we've talked about, in terms of how they engage with coworkers and how they spend their time. But I think we're at the beginning stages of it, I think.
It's good. Because I think you make a really interesting point. I feel like social media, even though we're digitally more connected, we're less connected personally. And that trend could be continued with virtual work environments. And so I think we have to be real intentional with that. I think one interesting thing that I personally think about what it allows our firm to do is I can go out and hire a specialist. I can go find Ryan Johns, who's a financial advisor, who's an attorney that has the type of experience that we want to bring to our firm. And I'm not limited by geography. And so I almost feel like, the niching of industries, especially the professional services, can like really get hyper focused. If I'm an attorney in Clinton, Iowa, and I'm just serving this geography, I've got to be jack of all trades, master of none. Where I could go, you know what, I'm going to do this super specific IP technology, with AI coming about. That's what my firm's going to be. And I'm going to go find the best attorneys in the nation, and we're going to serve people from right here. Like, I think more of that's going to happen versus this, we've got a lot of generalists right now. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah.
All right. Ryan, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I guess one thing I would add is I never thought I'd have this many screens on my desk, but no, other than that.
The data says productivity goes up dramatically when you start adding more screens. So.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a break even. I don't know if that's at like 4.5 screens or 5.5 screens or.
I think one of our clients has 6 screens. Is that right? I think
Yeah,
Jonathan's
I think
got
you're
6
right.
screens. I think
I think so.
you watch him in a meeting and he's like, what could you possibly be looking at on all the screens? But I sort of get it. It would be kind of nice to have all my stuff spread out in a
Yeah.
way that works. But
I'm not opposed to adding more, but
very good. Ryan, well, I appreciate you. I appreciate your contribution to our virtual team, this podcast, all the good work you do for our clients. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you for listening to the Vital Strategies podcast. We wanted to give you the first look at the tools we're developing that will help you with the 4 cornerstones of wealth building. To be an insider to get access to the tools to help manage your cash flow, create a tax strategy, invest wisely, and protect the wealth you're building, go to vitalstrategies.com/cornerstones. You'll be first in line to get access. These tools are designed to help you pay less tax so you can build more wealth and live a great life. Again, that website is vitalstrategies.com/cornerstones. I want to remind you to rate and review the Vital Strategies podcast on your favorite platform. Your feedback helps us towards our goal of saving our clients and listeners over $1 billion in taxes. Those dollars are better used in your hands versus the government bureaucracy. Thank you for listening and for being a vital entrepreneur. You're vital because you are the backbone of our economy, creating opportunities for your employees and driving growth. You're vital to your family, fostering abundance not only financially, but in all aspects of life that matter. Finally, you're vital to me because you strive to build wealth, make an impact through your business, and live a great life.